Have you ever watched a sulcata tortoise for more than 5 minutes? It walks. Then it walks some more. It reaches a corner, turns around, and starts walking again. A rock gets in the way. It pushes it. A plant blocks the path. It goes around it. A wall appears in front of it. It starts looking for another way. And somehow, it never seems satisfied with standing still. So what's going on inside that little reptile brain? Is your sulcata bored? Is it trying to escape? Or is there something deeper behind its constant movement? Because to a sulcata, walking isn't always about getting somewhere. Sometimes the movement itself is part of how it experiences the world. And today, we're going inside the mind of one of the most stubborn, persistent, and surprisingly determined tortoises on the planet. To understand why sulcatas move so much, we have to stop looking at them like tiny animals inside a yard. A sulcata evolved in a huge, open environment. The landscape doesn't end after a few meters. There are grasses to search, shelters to investigate, paths to cross, and constantly changing environmental conditions. Movement is simply part of life in that world. A tortoise doesn't need a destination in the human sense. It can move because the environment ahead contains something worth investigating, or simply because the next patch of ground is there. And that makes a backyard enclosure look very different from the perspective of the tortoise. Look at a sulcata's body. Strong legs, heavy shell, powerful front limbs, and a body built to push through difficult terrain. Those massive legs aren't just there to support its shell. They are tools for movement. A sulcata can cross surprisingly large areas while searching for food, shelter, water, and suitable conditions. So when your tortoise starts walking across the yard, it isn't necessarily being restless. Its body was designed for a life where moving through the environment is completely normal. The strange thing isn't that your sulcata keeps walking. The strange thing would almost be expecting it to stay in one place. Here's where things get interesting. A sulcata doesn't experience its environment from one stationary viewpoint. Every step changes what it can see. A new patch of grass appears. A different smell reaches its nose. The ground feels different beneath its feet. A new object enters its field of view. And suddenly, the environment has changed. Movement gives the tortoise more information. That's why walking can be more than transportation. It can be exploration. The sulcata isn't necessarily thinking about a final destination. It's responding to the environment, one step at a time. And then there's food. Sulcatas are primarily herbivores, constantly interacting with vegetation around them. A tortoise doesn't need to chase prey. It can simply keep moving through an area, sampling what's available. One patch of grass disappears behind it. Another appears ahead, then another. That creates a completely different hunting strategy. There is no dramatic chase, no sudden attack. Just move, search, eat, move again. And because the landscape keeps changing, there is always another patch worth checking. For a sulcata, the journey and the meal can become part of the same behavior. Now, watch what happens when a sulcata encounters a wall. It walks toward it, stops, and instead of simply giving up, it starts investigating. Maybe it turns left, then right. It pushes forward, it backs up, then tries again. To us, it can look almost ridiculous, but there may be something important happening. The tortoise has encountered an obstacle, and it's testing whether the path can continue. Sulcatas are persistent animals. When one route doesn't work, they often investigate another. And that persistence can make them look like they have an endless mission. Because as long as there is another direction to explore, the journey isn't over. One of the strangest things about watching a sulcata is that sometimes you simply can't see the reason for its movement. There is no obvious food, no visible threat, no person calling it. Nothing appears to be happening. Yet it keeps walking. That's because we only see part of the information available to the tortoise. It may be responding to temperature, smells, terrain, light, familiar routes, or something else that we simply can't detect. So when your sulcata suddenly changes direction, it doesn't necessarily mean it changed its mind. It may have noticed something that never entered our awareness. And sometimes the same tortoise will walk the same route again and again. That might look pointless, but familiar routes can be useful. A particular route may lead toward food, a shaded area, a preferred resting place, or simply a part of the environment the tortoise already knows. The more familiar a route becomes, the less uncertainty it contains. And animals don't always need to explore completely new territory. Sometimes they revisit places that have already proven useful. So that endless walking you see may actually contain a surprising amount of familiarity. There's another piece of the puzzle: temperature. As ectothermic animals, tortoises rely heavily on their environment to regulate their body temperature. That means the difference between sunlight and shade matters. A warm patch of ground can be useful at one moment and too warm later. A shaded area can become valuable when the temperature rises. So movement isn't always about curiosity. Sometimes the tortoise is responding to the physical conditions around its body. Move toward warmth. Move away from excessive heat. Find a more comfortable place. From the outside, it looks like wandering. From the tortoise's perspective, it's responding to its environment. And here's the funny part. A sulcata can spend a long time moving without appearing to be in any hurry. There is no sprint, no dramatic destination, just a slow, steady rhythm. That's because a tortoise doesn't need speed to explore. It has something else: time. It can afford to move slowly while continuously gathering information. A few steps, a pause, another few steps, maybe some grazing, then more walking. To us, it can look like endless wandering, but for a sulcata, slow movements may simply be its normal way of interacting with a very large world. Here's something humans often get wrong about animal movement. We assume every journey must have a destination. If your sulcata keeps walking, we immediately wonder, where is it trying to go? But animals don't always move because they have a specific destination in mind. Sometimes movement itself is useful. It exposes the tortoise to new food, new temperatures, new scents, new terrain, new information. The tortoise doesn't need a map in its head with a final destination marked at the end. It can simply respond to what it encounters and keep moving. That's why a sulcata can walk across the same yard for what seems like hours without ever appearing to have a clear goal. The environment itself is providing the reasons. Now imagine what your backyard looks like from the perspective of a sulcata. A fence isn't just a fence. It's a boundary. A pile of rocks becomes terrain. A patch of weeds becomes food. A shaded corner becomes shelter. A raised piece of ground becomes something worth climbing over. Suddenly, the yard isn't boring at all. It's an environment filled with different surfaces, smells, temperatures, and obstacles. And your sulcata is moving through all of it, one discovery at a time. What looks like a simple backyard to you can become an entire landscape to a tortoise. And if you've ever owned a sulcata, you probably already know something else. They can be unbelievably persistent. If they want to move forward, they keep trying. If something blocks the route, they investigate it. If the path changes, they search for another direction. That persistence can look almost stubborn from a human perspective. But in the wild, an animal that stops exploring every time it encounters an obstacle would miss opportunities. Persistence keeps the animal moving through its environment. And that same behavior can appear in your backyard when your tortoise decides that the other side of the fence absolutely must be investigated. So, when your sulcata spends another afternoon walking, don't automatically assume it's bored. Don't assume it has nowhere to go. And don't assume every step has to lead somewhere important. For a tortoise, movement can be exploration. It can be feeding. It can be thermal regulation. It can be familiarity. And sometimes, it may simply be responding to whatever the environment is telling it. That's what makes their behavior so fascinating. They're not built to experience the world by sitting still. They experience it by interacting with it, by walking across it, pushing against it, climbing over it, and discovering what lies on the other side. The next time you see your sulcata walking, and somehow walking even farther, take a closer look. It may not be trying to get somewhere. It may be exploring, searching, feeding, regulating its body, following familiar routes, or simply responding to whatever the world is changing around it. What looks like endless wandering may actually be a very natural way of interacting with the environment. Because a sulcata wasn't built to spend its entire life staring at the same four walls. It was built to move through a landscape, slowly, patiently, and relentlessly. And perhaps that's why these tortoises can be so fascinating to watch. They remind us that exploration doesn't always require speed, or even a destination. Sometimes you just keep moving and see what the world has to offer. If you enjoyed discovering how reptiles think, subscribe to Cold-Blooded Minds, because every strange behavior hides a decision, and every decision tells a story.